When you hear the name Thomas Edison, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's one thing. But what if I told you that the simple story we all know is actually keeping his real genius in the dark? Well, let's flip the switch and find out what truly made him so revolutionary. So let me ask you a really simple question, one you probably learned the answer to in, third grade? Who invented the light bulb? If you just said Thomas Edison, well, you're not exactly wrong. But you're also missing the most important and honestly, the most interesting part of the story. The reality is way more complicated. So let's start by just shattering that big light bulb myth right from the get-go. The truth is, Edison wasn't the first person to have this idea. Not even close. People had been working on electric light for decades. I mean, all the way back in 1809, a guy named Humphrey Davy showed off an electric arc lamp. And by the 1870s, inventors like Charles Brush and Joseph Swan already had patents on their own versions of light bulbs. So Edison didn't start this race, he just jumped into it when it was already well underway. Okay, so if he didn't invent the first light bulb, why is he the one we all remember? What's the big deal? Well, his true genius wasn't about invention at all. It was about innovation. And that difference right there, it's everything. See, an invention is that first spark, that aha moment. But innovation, that's taking the spark and turning it into a fire that can actually light up the entire world. Edison was an absolute master innovator. He took ideas that were clumsy or expensive and refined them until they were perfect for everyone. He was playing a totally different game. He wasn't just thinking about the little glass bulb. He was thinking bigger, way bigger. He was thinking about the power plants that would generate the electricity, the wires to get it to your house, the sockets, the switches on the wall, the whole shebang. He was building the entire ecosystem that would make electric light a normal part of life. That was the real game changer. So how on earth did one person do all that? Well, he didn't just have a dusty old workshop. No, he built what he called an invention factory. Just look at this place. This was his lab in West Orange, New Jersey, and it was the world's first industrial research and development lab. It wasn't just a place to tinker. It was basically an assembly line for new ideas, designed to systematically pump out useful, marketable products. And you want to talk about results? Get this. Over his lifetime, Edison was granted 1,093 patents. 1,093. That number is just staggering. It proves it wasn't about one lucky idea. It was about having a system that could generate breakthrough after breakthrough. And inside this idea machine, he had everything you could possibly imagine. Specialized labs for physics and chemistry, machine shops to build prototypes on the spot, and a massive research library with over 10,000 books. It was a self-contained universe of innovation, completely ahead of its time. And his mission was crystal clear. I love this quote from him. He wasn't just inventing for the fun of it. He was laser-focused on creating things that people actually wanted. And, this is the key part, things they could afford. This market-driven approach was the real engine behind all his success. But, that engine didn't always run perfectly. In fact, a huge part of Edison's whole process was something we all try to avoid like the plague: failure. I mean, just look at his track record. It's full of hits and misses. His very first patent, an automatic vote recorder, was a complete commercial flop because politicians actually liked that voting was slow. Go figure. Then you have his attempt at concrete houses. Great idea, but way too expensive. Or his talking movies, which just didn't work right. But with every single miss, he learned a critical lesson. And that very first failure was probably the most important one of his life. It taught him his golden rule, the one that would guide his entire career. Never, ever invent something that people don't actually want. So with all this pressure to constantly innovate and create things people wanted, how did he stay creative? Well, here's a fun one. He had a, let's say, unique napping technique. You've gotta hear this. He would sit down in a comfy chair and hold a steel ball in each hand. Then, as he started to drift off to sleep, his muscles would relax, his hands would open, and clang! The steel balls would crash to the floor, waking him up instantly. He'd then grab a notepad and immediately write down whatever crazy ideas were floating around in his head in that moment. And what's wild is that modern science totally backs this up. That weird, fuzzy state right between being awake and being asleep is called hypnagogia, and it's known to be a hotbed of creativity and spontaneous thought. Edison basically built a little machine to hack into his own subconscious and pull out ideas. How cool is that? So when we look back at his real legacy, it's so much bigger than just a list of things he invented. Yeah, he perfected the light bulb and created entire industries like recorded music and movies, but maybe his most important and enduring creation was the modern R&D lab itself, a blueprint for how to systematically turn science and business into things that change the world. Which leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, right? What's actually more valuable in the long run? A single brilliant flash of genius, or a disciplined, repeatable system that can produce 1,000 of them? It's a really interesting thing to think about.